Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Tracy Seventh-day Adventist Church. My name is Mike I guess it says Michael up there. But we welcome you all here today, all of you in the crowd, the audience, and those of you watching around the world, whether it be live, whether it be on tape delay. We're here for you too. But we have a lot of different announcements today. We have a great number of people already here, and we're just starting. We're on time at 11 o'clock. So let's get started with our announcements, because you're going to be hearing from multiple people, not just me, with the announcements today. So first one, let's see what slide. Surprise. Oh, there's a welcome back slide. Now, you may have seen the very small screen as you walked in to the left. And on that screen was this same picture. Now, this says, welcome back, for anybody who can't see that, like me, Pastor Ed and Ann Fargusson. Now, you will be hearing much more from him and about them. Actually, you'll be hearing from Ann today as well, so they're getting fully involved on their first official times back here in Tracy, California. So, welcome back. Let's give a little round of applause here first here. For those of you who maybe this is your first time here in a while or you're watching, we have not had an official pastor for many, many months. So we're essentially starving, wanting somebody. And while this is not full-time for the rest of their lives, it is nice when it's somebody that some people here are familiar with, because even if you weren't here in our church many years ago when they were here, recently, Pastor Fargusson has been here as a guest speaker, and once again, you'll hear much more from him. But that's the first thing. So we have a welcome back, and not just welcome back. Because you came back, we decided to also have potluck today. So potluck is after church today. Many of you have brought food. If you did not bring food, it's okay. Make sure you come down to the Better Living Center after the service so you can fellowship with everybody else that is here. Let's see what comes up next. Oh, it's the birthdays and anniversaries, and we do have birthdays and anniversaries. So first of all, the birthdays. We see August 10th, Tim Mustard. We see August 11th, Tibin Zechariah. And August 12th, Juan Carlos Sosa. So we have 3 birthdays this week. Happy birthday to all 3 of our birthday recipients. But below there, you may see the anniversaries. And I am happy to announce the couple that is celebrating an anniversary this week on August 12th, Chuck and Linda Bennett. They are in the house this morning, and I found out that this will be anniversary number 41. After a couple of minutes of discussion, they decided they were married in 1983, and so let's congratulate Chuck and Linda on their 41st anniversary this week. Very good. We do, of course, welcome the visitors that are here. If this is your first or your second time here, there are cards in the pew in front of you, so go ahead and fill that out. And then we do have small gifts, if you've never been to our church before as well, that we would like to share with you so you can become more knowledgeable about the Tracy Church. Now, coming up, we have something tomorrow at the school, and that is called a work bee. Funny enough, the person that's going to come up here is sometimes called B as well, just not spelled the same way. Somehow, this person ends up in the same place I am a lot. But let's introduce her to you. So she will talk about the work bee. That is Mrs. Beatrice On.
Good morning, everyone. Like he said, I'm Mrs. Beatrice On. I am the teaching principal over across the parkway at our church school. And tomorrow, we do this every year. Tomorrow, we are going to have our school work bee. And our school work bee is we clean up the school for the kids. We clean up the cobwebs. Like Kimberly loves to clean the school fans and all the classrooms. That's her job. I don't know for how many years. So we need some help. And we need help dusting, we need help hosing down mats, trash cans, stuff like that. I don't think there's anything that needs to be repaired. It's just more cleaning up, sprucing up the school for the kids. We don't start school until August 21st, so the kids are still on vacation. So we would appreciate if you guys would come out, those who can, come and help us out. And also, when you walk out of the church, you're going to see across the field, there's a big pile of playground tan bark that John arranged to get delivered to the school and everything. And so we need help shoveling that tan bark and spreading it in the playground. So if you have shovels and a rake, not a leaf rake, a non-leaf rake, I don't know what it's called, Mama Sylvia. If you bring those over, that would be very helpful. It starts tomorrow at 9 a.m. and we'll have some food for you after you work a little bit. Okay. And then just a little tidbit if I wanted to say about Pastor Fargusson. So Pastor Fargusson was here when I was a student at the school. And it might have been in 5th grade when he came over to the school and he asked the kids, okay, does anybody want to do Bible studies or anything like that? And so there was a group of us that did. And then after our Bible study, he asked, does anyone want to be baptized? And I think there was 2 of us or 3 of us that raised our hand, and he baptized me. And he's back. So that's pretty cool. All right, thank you so much for your time, and hope to see a lot of you guys, or send some friends, or just come along and help us tomorrow, please. Thank you.
The other thing, if you look there, maybe possibly wheelbarrows, because where the chips are at is a distance away from parts of the playground. So if you happen to have wheelbarrow or access to a wheelbarrow, that would also be very much appreciated to help get the bark done much quicker. Okay, now we have another special guest that is going to be coming up, and this is Mrs. Allison Cloak to talk to us about something involving Christian women and a retreat.
All right, in your bulletin today, our wonderful secretary has also made extra copies of these. So if you want to take a peek in your bulletin, it's an announcement about, yes, the women's retreat at Leone Meadows. Now, I asked Sylvia this morning because Sylvia, our own Sylvia, is the only lady that has been on the committee the whole time. And we're talking years and years. So I asked her, I said, Sylvia, how many years is this one going to be? And she goes, I can't remember. But we know it's in the 30s somewhere, we think. So anyway, I have been privileged to go to every single women's retreat there has been, except for 2. The first year they started out, I'm not sure how we didn't get communication, but anyway, missed the first year. The next time that I missed was I had just had a baby in August and didn't think October was too soon to leave a newborn. So anyway, which means this is my special getaway every year. And with our 5 kids, John was so generous in making sure I had my application in and that I got to go away, have a whole weekend where I didn't have to cook or clean, but just hang out with friends and hear some good, messages. So ladies, I just want this to be something that you should take part in. If you have never gone to Leone Meadows for Women's Retreat, this might be your year. There's also out on the bulletin board, it might be a teensy bit behind that small screen that's out there. But if you look up on the board, there are applications in a little envelope. So the reason also that I'm up here, not to advertise it so much, but I love it so much, is that registration starts the 15th, which is this coming week. And so when you're looking at your application, it says don't mail it before the 15th, but on the 15th, especially if you'd like to buddy up with somebody and be in a lodge room, then the date of August 15th is very important. So anyway, ladies, raise your hands how many of you have gone to Women's Retreat before? Oh, good. Look at that. Okay. Well, this time next, in the fall, in October, we want to have even twice that amount going. Oh, and this is just a little funny. I told you that we have 5 kids, and I would leave them all, and John would take care of them. And funny things happened during the time that I was away. But one of the weekends I was away, he was probably the elder up front or something, and he said, I just want to encourage all you men out there to send your wives to Women's Retreat. He goes, I just love it too because I always get a new woman when I get home, right? Okay, so in case that didn't go through. But yeah, he said, oh, I love women's retreat. I always get a new woman back. So anyway, thank you very much. Applications are on the board.
Hey, now, that was a good time. Okay, I think she was actually underselling a little bit on the 30 years because I'm pretty sure that they're somewhat close. The women's retreat started somewhat close to when Chuck and Linda got married. We're talking in the 80s. It was not late 90s. It was early to mid 80s because I remember when I was a little boy and our mother would leave for the women's retreat. So, is there another slide? I don't want to, okay, perfect. So, coming up now, of course, it's praise time, praise singing. You get a praise trio today, so get ready. Here we go. It's time to worship.
Why does she have to tell a story? I do want to give you a tip. This is my roommate from the men's retreat, and we read the weather report just a few months ago. Why are you laughing at that? Anyway, it was forecast to be 100% chance of rain. And what was it?
Snowed in.
8 inches or so. And he had never tried in his expedition the four-wheel drive. But God was our four-wheel drive that day. We got home safely, especially with him driving. Okay, let's go on. Let's Everlasting Arms. That's a good one to follow after that story.
You can all stand up for this.
Good idea.
You can even lean on it.
Left or right? We'll do it.
Is that your new wife or your
This is the original.
new woman?
My first wife. What a fellowship, what a joy divine, leaning on the everlasting arms. What a blessedness, what a peace is mine, leaning on the everlasting arms. Leaning, safe and secure from all alarms. Leaning on the everlasting arms. Oh, how sweet to walk in this pilgrim way, leaning on the everlasting arms. Oh, how bright the path grows from day to day, leaning on the everlasting arms. Leaning, safe and secure from all alarms. Leaning on the everlasting arms. What have I to dread? What have I to fear? Leaning on the everlasting arms. I have blessed peace with my Lord so dear. Leaning on the everlasting arms. Leaning, safe and secure from all alarms. Leaning on the everlasting arms.
Hello, my name is Cassandra, and I'm going to be talking. Proverbs 3:5-6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not lean on your own understandings. In your ways, acknowledge him, and he will make straight your paths. Thank you.
Come on down. Anybody else? Okay, all right. Let me ask you a question. Oh, we got a little one coming. Okay, good. Anyway, I have a question for you. Anybody has Disney Plus at home? Oh, who doesn't, right? Okay, good. We're going to talk about feelings a little bit today, okay? And I have a book here. It's called The Color Monster. It's about feelings, okay? And it says here that this is a color monster. It says his feelings are all mixed up, but he doesn't understand why. Look at you, monster. You're a mess. It's all different colors. Okay. Whoops. You've jumbled up all your emotions and all of your colors too. And so I know you can separate your feelings and put one in each jar, and I'd like to help you do that. Let's see here. Before I show you the first one, let me ask you a question. Anybody see Inside Out? Okay.
I've seen both.
You've seen both? Okay, good. Okay, let's see. Let's talk about the first feeling here. Got to get to my pictures here. Who is this?
Joy.
Joy. Okay. Yeah. And what color is this? Yellow, yes. Happiness or joy. It shines like the sun and twinkles as a star. And when you're feeling joy, you tend to play and be happy. Okay, let's see here. Let's pick another one here. Who is this? Sadness, that's right. Okay, keep losing my phone here. And this is sadness. And this is sadness, and it's gentle like a rainy day. And when you're feeling sad, you might like to be alone. Do you like to be alone sometime when you're sad? Of course. All right, here's another one. Let's see here. Whoops, pictures. Okay, who is this? Anger, exactly. Anger. The red is bright and red, and when you're angry, you want to stop and shout and roar. It's not fair. Nobody ever says that, right? It's not fair. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Let me see. Who is this? Fear, yes. This is fear, and it hides in the back shadows. And when you're afraid, you feel tiny and helpless. Fear makes it hard to even be brave sometimes. But look at all the different ones. We put them all in here, okay? Wait, I missed one. Calm. Okay, this one is calm, and it's light as green, and when you're feeling calm, you seem to be at peace, and you breathe a lot slower. Yeah. So here's all the feelings that we talked about in all the different jars so that you can figure out which one you're feeling. But guess what? There's one more. What is this? Love. And who gives us... Wait, where is it here? Yes. Who gives us love? Jesus. You know, in the Bible, it says that Jesus is loves us, but he is love. He doesn't just give us love, he is love. Okay? So I want you to remember that. Okay, I have some special colored pencils for you today that are like the Inside Out people that are different colors. So you guys can come up and get a pencil if you like. You have a pencil? Okay. All right. Is it Children's Church or something? Okay, I guess it's Children's Church. Thank you for coming.
Now it is time for our prayer portion of the service, but a couple things for you today. First of all, we have one of the requests is for Pathfinders around the world. So I'm going to tell you a little story right now. Now, there is a international Pathfinder camporee that has been happening this week. Some of you are aware of this. Pathfinders, if you are have never been in the Adventist system at all, it's somewhat similar to what Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts would look like, but it's under the Adventist umbrella. And every 5 years, I believe, they have an international camporee where legitimately more than 60,000 people go to this. Mostly kids, obviously, with some adults there as well. But this year's is in Gillette, Wyoming. Fun fact, one of the times I talked to you about being in Gillette, Wyoming, and getting the taxi cab in Gillette, where it was like a 16-year-old driving me around, and I thought my life might end. But Gillette, Wyoming is where they hosted that this year. It's the first time they ever hosted it. And international, meaning that you literally have not just thousands from the United States, but there are thousands of people that come from around the world to this, from other countries. So they're obviously flying in and then driving from there. Our own Spanish church Pathfinder group had a group that has been there as well. Now, getting 60,000 of anybody together is not an easy thing. They actually have estimated, as I've been reading everything this week, that there have been more than 60,000 people that showed up. Well, somewhere between 70 and 75, they believe. The problem is that weather in Wyoming has been unpredictable. And so one of the nights, there were basically surprise storms that hit and flooded areas of this humongous camplex site that they have. So it didn't affect everybody, but it affected some of the groups greatly. And unfortunately, some of the international groups, where it basically flooded their area completely out because people stay in tents there, campers, things like that, but there are no actual buildings they're staying in. So that happened early in the week. So the people of Gillette have helped throughout the week. Some of the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints, the Mormon Church, actually started housing some of the groups there because they needed places to stay where they were at their sites. The hard part is that because of more weather coming in, and they expected it to be today, they actually have had to end the camporee one day early, so they aren't even having the final big show tonight. This has caused a lot more consternation because, of course, you have 60,000 people who are expecting to be there through Saturday who now can't stay in that spot. So basically, we're asking for prayers to help everybody get back safely, but also everybody to find places, because we're not talking about just our group. It's literally 60 to 70,000 young people from around the world. So they have made it through, but they need help. Everyone needs help getting safely back to wherever they are going. So please keep our Spanish Church Pathfinder group in your prayers as well. The other thing that has been kind of mentioned is school. Now, our school year here at the Tracy SDA School doesn't start for another couple weeks, but many of you have people in your lives who may have started school this week if they're in Tracy or Mountain House, or coming up or Manteca. They started last week. So just by show of hands, raise your hand if someone in your family started school or is starting school soon, or grandchildren, either children, or you are a teacher, or you are a student. So in this congregation right now, raise your hand if someone in your family is starting school or has started school already this year. So those of you there, more than half of the people raised their hands. So this involves a lot of people. Every school year starts, a lot of people involved. As you heard, we need your help for the school work be here tomorrow. But there are many families who have students in schools all over the place. There are teachers here. I am one of them who just started school on Thursday. Believe me, we need your prayers. But I just ask you to remember, because everyone starts at a different time, but every starting of every school year, it's a really important time. Some of you who are parents are so happy the school year is starting. Potentially grandparents too. But it's a very important time, and no matter where you attend school, no matter where your family goes, prayers are needed every single day. So a lot of children-based prayers we need today for the Pathfinder Camporee and for the children of the world around here that are going to school. So I'm going to go ahead and kneel. If you can, please do as I offer up prayer. Dear Jesus, we come to you today at the end of this summer with thanks for a pastor who is returning to help our church out since we have been without. So we thank you so much for Pastor Ed and Ann returning to the Tracy Church. We also thank you for all the people here today and all the people watching that are reinvigorated, knowing that there is somebody here on a semi-regular basis. We ask that you please be with all those Camporee attendees, the 60 to 70,000, and please help them to be able to have had at least the best experience possible for them, and that they are all able to find their way back to where they came from safely without too much more ups and downs along the way. We also thank you so much for all of our children here in this church or associated with this church for wherever they are going to be attending this year. We ask that you help everyone to have the best school year possible. Teachers, parents, students, relatives, grandparents, everybody, all of us have been in school. We thank you for all the happy things that are happening in people's lives right now, but we ask watch over everyone and bring peace and calm to everyone involved. Thank you for everything you do for us. Help us to have a great rest of our day. In your name, amen.
I think it's worth clearing up one last thing in the front here. When Allison asked if you've ever been to women's retreat, raise your hand. I raised my hand. So I think I need to explain that because Mike just talked about the Pathfinders. I was in the Pathfinders with the San Ramon Church, and I was in a teepee, and it was like ice cold. Allison was in a cabin where it was nice and warm. And no, I wasn't there to keep my eye on her. I trust her. But I was with the Pathfinders at Leone at the same time. So that, I hope that cleared it up. I mean, okay.
Thank you for clarifying.
God sent his son, they called him Jesus. He came to love, heal, and forgive. He bled and died to buy my pardon. An empty grave is there to prove my Savior lives. tomorrow, because he lives. All fear is gone, because I know he holds the future, and life is worth the living just because he lives. How sweet to hold a newborn baby and feel the pride and joy he gives. But greater still, the calm assurance this child can face uncertain days because he lives. Because he lives, I can face tomorrow. Because he lives, all fear is gone. Because I know he holds the future, and life is worth the living just because he lives. Doug? Lawson says we're done, you can sit down.
Good morning, church. Now, I want you to know that normally I will not preach from this position. Normally, I like to move around a little bit and so forth, but I'm wounded today. I had surgery on my hand on Thursday afternoon, and it's still a little bit sore and stiff, and so I can't hold anything in it. And I was reminded by John Noons last time I was here that when I pastored here, my habit was to stand down there and hold my Bible the whole time. Well, I'm older now. And with age comes, I don't know, wisdom and sore body parts, okay? So I don't do everything the way I used to do it. But I want to start by saying one of the things, I won't be able to be here all the time, but I want to be accessible to you. And I don't have business cards to give out, but I will make sure to make my email address and my phone number available to everybody, all right? We'll get that done. I can tell you what it is right now. This is just a little inside ballpark stuff, but the conference, after I retired, they were supposed to kill my email address 30 days after I retired. They never did. It's been active the whole time. So I cleared all like 5,000 messages that were on there, so I'm ready to go. So you can use the old NCC email address, which some of you already have, but if you don't, it's not too hard. It's just eFargusson, all right? eFargusson at nccSDA.com. Stands for Northern California Conference of Seventh-day Adventists, right? So that's my email address that you can use. And then my phone number is 916-768-3486. I've had that cell phone for a long time. I actually did some volunteer work with the Alzheimer's Association and an organization called the Association of Frontal Temporal Degeneration. And in doing that volunteer work, I did support group for a long time. And they said to me, what information do you want to put in on our website? And I gave them my cell phone number. They said, no, you don't want to do that. You don't want to do that. I said, listen, for the last 20 years, my cell phone number has been readily available to 40,000 people. If it was a problem, I would know it by now. So my cell phone number is actually out there all over the place. So, and it's never been a problem. I've only gotten 2 crank calls on it, other than the people that bug everybody. One was a person that called. They were upset about something, but they were apparently high on drugs, and I couldn't understand a word they were trying to get across to me. Anyway, so My cell phone will be made available. My email address will be made available because I want to be accessible. I don't have a schedule yet. I will get a schedule, and once I have a schedule, we'll publish that schedule. But part of the reason is I want to talk to Beatrice first to see how I can be supportive of the school, and I want to talk to other leaders to see how I can be, most used in my time here, all right? So we'll get that figured out here. And one more plug for the school, right? There are people in this audience here that are products of that school, including Beatrice and Michael, both. But I have to say, when I came here, my sons, we have identical twin boys, my sons started kindergarten at that school. My sons, I figured out one day that my sons did Seventh Adventist education from kindergarten through the end of residency in medicine. Okay? Because they did their residency at Loma Linda. So they went all the way through Adventist schools. My sons are products of this school right here. They didn't go all 8 grades here. They went up until halfway through the 6th grade here. But they got an excellent education at this school. And so I have great confidence that the ministry that this church has done through that school over the years has borne fruit all over and has touched the world. So that ministry over there is not just a ministry for parents of children. It's a ministry of all of us here. We should all be supporting it because it's our school and it's a ministry that touches the lives of people and makes a difference. Okay? So that's my plug for the school. And I will talk about it more. I will talk about a lot of things more. I'll be here long enough, so I won't give everything today. All right? But I am glad to be here, and I do intend to serve with distinction as long as I can and for as much as I'm able to help out and do what I can. I was talking to others this morning. I can truthfully say that I have witnessed God do miracles, but I also can prove that it's not about me. Because in times where I had no faith whatsoever, God still showed up. I want to get into our message today, but I want to begin by telling a little personal story. When I was an early teenager, my brother, Alan, and a friend of ours named Bob, we were bored, and it was a hot summer day in Southern California, and we were trying to figure out what to do, and we came up with an idea. Now, our idea, if we had cell phones with cameras in those days, I could show you a video of it. But in those days, we didn't have such things. And it's probably better that it's not recorded because there are some things that I've done in my life that I'm glad aren't out there in public. This is one of them because we came up with this idea that if we took an M80 firecracker and we put it in the fuselage of a model airplane and lighted it and then threw it off the roof, it would soar through the air and then explode gloriously. So I ran home, got my model airplane that I didn't care about anymore, and we surgically implanted the M80 firecracker in it. And then Bob was going to get up on the roof of his mother's house, and he was going to throw this airplane off. But we ran into a strategic problem immediately in that there was a big tree in the front yard of his mother's house. And that was not going to work because the plane was not going to fly. It was going to hit branches or whatever. But there was this divine event that occurred because the next door neighbor was a lady that went to the same church that we all went to, a widow. And, she was having some work done on the roof of her house, and the roofers had quit and gone home, and they had just left a ladder to the roof of her house. So we knew it was a divine plan. So Bob climbed up on the roof, and he got to the peak of the roof, and her yard was nice and clear and a beautiful landscaped lawn, and this is going to be glorious. And so Bob lights the fuse and goes to throw it. He falls down, and the plane lands on his chest. He panics and flings this thing off. It goes flying through the air, and nothing that resembles flight crashes into this lady's yard, and the firecracker comes out and starts rolling. Well, the low spot in the lawn was where a sprinkler head was. Now, the lady hears this thump on her roof and jumps out of her chair, comes out on the front porch, and standing right in front of her house, and my brother and I standing there just as the firecracker goes off. And there is this explosion, and there is this geyser of grass, dirt, sprinkler head. And my brother and I stand there with the most angelic look on our face, like we have no idea what just happened. Bob had jumped off the roof, and he comes running around the corner, and this dear lady, she looks at the hole in her lawn, then she looks up at my brother and I, then she looks over at Bob. Back down to the hole in the ground, back up to Alan and I, back over to Bob. And then she proceeds to say, "Bob, what are you doing leading these two innocent young men astray?" Whereupon Alan and I just stood there with our angelic looks. Yes, we are just being led astray. Well, there are many lessons I should have learned that day. I should have learned respect for other people's property. I should have learned the dangers of dealing with explosives. But you know what I learned that day? That if I wanted to get away with something, I just needed Bob around. Sometimes we miss the point. And I tell that story because we're going to go into a very familiar story in the Bible, and I think most of us have missed the point on this story. It's found in 1 Samuel 17. It's the story of David and Goliath, we call it. Little background to the story. We're going to go back just a little bit to think about what happened. Who is the king? Saul is the king at this time. How did Saul get to be king? Well, the children of Israel, they wanted a king. God didn't want them to have a king, but they insisted and they got a king. Do you remember what was Saul's primary qualification for being king? He was good looking and he was tall. He was head and shoulders above everybody else. So that's his primary qualification for being king, good looking and tall. Now, it doesn't take too long before God says he's not a good king. We're going to talk about why in a minute, but bottom line is he wasn't a good king, and God says to Samuel the prophet, I want you to go and I want you to anoint somebody else. And Samuel says to God, but if I go and anoint another king, then Saul is going to have my head because he's king. And if I'm out stirring up trouble, he's not going to like it. And God says, well, just go and tell him you're there to offer a sacrifice. So he goes, and he ends up in the town, and he calls all these young men forward. And you know how it goes, first, second, third, is there anybody else? The youngest, he's out in the field with the sheep, bring him in. And that's the one God picks, and that is David. So we have young David, who's now been anointed king. Now, what's not clear in Scripture is whether or not even David knew why he was being anointed. Because it doesn't say that Samuel said he was anointing him to be king. And immediately, David goes and ministers at the palace. And he's helping Saul. Saul's very troubled, and David would play the harp and calm him down. And that goes on for a while, where David is actually going back and forth between serving in the king's court and back taking care of the sheep. He's going back and forth. Now, battle comes along, and that's where this story starts. You know how it is, the Valley of Elah. I'm curious, has anybody here ever been there? Ann and I have been there, but it's been like a lot of years ago because it happened while I was pastor of this church. And we visited the Valley of Elah. And Valley of Elah is basically, there's a creek that runs through there. But the creek nowadays has water in it only when it rains. Now, I don't know. I think the climate might have been different in Israel when David was there because David talks about killing lions and bears, and there are no lions and bears there anymore and haven't been for a long time. I suspect because you may not know this, but at one time, every tree in that whole country was cut down. Every single tree. That had to have affected the whole situation there, climate-wise. Anyway, so that valley is very dry, and you can still, there's a lot of stones there. You can go there, and there's all kinds of stones there. Do you know why there's so many stones in the Valley of Elah? Because the Israeli government trucks them in there because tourists are constantly picking up the stones that are there. If they don't put stones back there, there'd be no stone in that valley. So everyone that goes there thinks they have the very stone that, hit Goliath or whatever. Even while we were there was a joke in the newspaper that had a rock in a forehead of a skull saying, "We have found the skull." Of course, it was a joke. But anyway, so you've got this Valley of Elah, and you've got on one side of the valley, you've got the Israelites, and on the other side, you have the Philistines. Now, the Philistines had been there for a while, and they were pestering Israel a lot. And so they're across the valley from one another, and they basically lined up every day, and they would yell and shout at each other. And the Philistines had this guy that would come out. His name was Goliath, and he would come out every day, and he would make fun of the Israelites. And he would say, "Our gods are stronger than your gods, and we're going to win." And he was so big and tall that he scared everybody. He was a giant. And people were afraid. David comes along to help his brothers. His father says, "Go take your brothers some supplies." He shows up, and he'd actually made more than one trip already. But on this trip, he gets there at the time in the morning when Goliath comes out and taunts the Israelites. And that's the setting for our story. And I'm going to go right to verse 26 in chapter 17 of 1 Samuel. And I'm reading from the New King James Version today. I use different versions at different times, but today it's New King James. Then David spoke to the men who stood by him, saying, "What shall be done for the man who kills this Philistine and takes away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine, that he should defy the armies of the living God?" Now, if we read the story carefully, you will see that his brothers get very upset that he says what he says. And I'm guessing that that's because they're remembering this anointing ceremony, that he was chosen above all of them. Maybe a little brotherly jealousy. There are three brothers there. And they're from the oldest on down. So you've got three brothers. They're all older than David, but they're upset because David's asking these questions. But I want you to notice in those verses, what's David's concern? His concern is about the reputation of his God. He doesn't say, "Why aren't you fighting?" He says, "Who's going to take away this reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God?" He's worried about God. Now let's go down to verse 32 and let's look at what Saul's focus is. Then David said to Saul, "Let no man's heart fail because of him. Your servant will go and fight with this Philistine." And Saul said to David, "You're not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for you are a youth, and he a man of war from his youth." He's trying to say, how are you going to go up against this guy? You're just a kid going up against an experienced, battle-hardened warrior. So what is Saul's focus on? The ordinary kind of stuff that we all are focused on, really, if you stop and think about it. He's really focused on there. He's looking at the reality. He's going like, scrawny teenage boy going up against a warrior? That makes no sense whatsoever. So then if we continue on in verses 36 and 37, David says this, "Your servant has killed both a lion and a bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, seeing he has defied the armies of the living God." Moreover, David said, "The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear, he will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine. Can you imagine that? David has such confidence that he is doing God's will, that he is just sure that God is going to take care of things, just like he has in the past. I want you to notice something. He doesn't go to Saul and he doesn't say, Saul, don't worry, I'm really good with a sling. It's never mentioned until we get down to the actual event. He just says, listen, God's going to deliver me because this guy is defying God through you. And I'm going to go and I'm going to fight him. Now, Saul is stuck in that common way of thinking, the way most of us are stuck. Skipping down to verse 38 now. So Saul clothed David with his armor. He put a bronze helmet on his head. He also clothed him with a coat of mail. David fastened his sword to his armor and tried to walk, for he had not tested them. And David said to Saul, I cannot walk with these, for I have not tested them. So David took them off. Now, there's a couple things to bring out here. I have to say, when I was in seminary, it was so long ago, computers were hard to come by. We had these things called typewriters. I don't know if anybody remembers them. Those cursed things, because every time you made a mistake, you had to start over again. I made a lot of mistakes. So when I, was in seminary, college, I was way too young for computers. In seminary, which is my graduate degree, I discovered that the Archaeological Museum had computers. Now, you've never heard of the computers that they had, because you got to remember, I started seminary at a time when IBM just introduced the PC. It was a brand new thing. Okay? So these computers predated that. But they were computers. And when you made a mistake, you could actually correct the mistake before you printed. So I thought, how do I get my hands on those computers? So what I did was I went to the Siegfried Horn Archaeological Museum and I said to them, I will do research for you for free if you will let me access your computers. And free labor sounded good to them. And then I went to the seminary. I said, listen, I'd like to do an independent study in archaeology. So I'm going to do research. Can I use it for credit? They said, yes. So I'm winning. I have access to computers and I'm getting school credit for the research that I'm doing. So I go off and I start doing my research and I start using the computers. The research project they gave me was researching the armor of Saul. This is Bronze Age armor. There's only iron mentioned once in here, and it's Goliath's spearhead. That's because iron was new. Now, I ran across a fascinating article by a man who had done a lot of research on all of this stuff that's mentioned here and in other places. And his argument was that we always talk about how we think that moving from stone to bronze, from bronze to iron, that that's all an improvement. But he pointed out that that was actually not an improvement. The only reason they switched from stone to bronze was because they ran out of the kind of stone that they were used to using. Because that stone, he actually described that he needed surgery, major surgery done, and he required them to use stone implements for surgery. Because stone is so much sharper than surgical steel. It's just there's not enough of that kind of stone around to use for all kinds of things. So they ran out of stone, so they needed to find something else. And it took them a while to perfect the manufacturing of bronze. At the time that this happened, iron was so poor that its only good quality was that it was heavy. It did not hold an edge. It couldn't be kept sharp because they did not yet have the way to do alloys or do the various hardening treatments. They hadn't learned how to do that yet. So iron was inferior to bronze at this point in time. So it wasn't used much. But when it was used, it was kind of intimidating because it was heavy. So this armor, he puts it on. Now, when I was a kid, I was taught that David took it off because it didn't fit him. But it actually doesn't say that here. What does David say? He says, I haven't tested it. And this is an important point to remember, because what is he saying? He's saying, it's not that this isn't good, but I don't know how to use it. It would be like me going into certain kinds of machine shops and being expected to actually do some work. I learned a little machine shop many, many years ago, but I can't machine these things, and especially now that everything's programmed, they don't do the old-fashioned hand stuff. It's all programmed. I don't know how to do that. I could have very expensive equipment and not be able to use it. And David is saying, this might be all good, but doesn't work for me. So then what does he do? He takes it off and he goes out. And the Bible tells us that he takes his sling, because as a shepherd he was used to using it. And by the way, I should point out something. I know that you can go and watch YouTube videos about slings. They didn't actually use slings as weapons in those days. The slings they used were designed to chase off animals. And so when David goes there, he has a weapon, but it's not a good weapon. It's not like he has a gun. But it says he picks up 5 stones. Now, does anybody know why he picked up 5 stones? I have to say, I learned that nothing goes to waste in the Bible. Does anybody know why he picked up 5 stones? This is one of those little known facts. Goliath had 4 brothers. David was not picking up extra ammo. He figured he was going to have to fight 5 people. So, he takes and he goes down, but what is he relying on? Let's look at verses 45 to 47. Then David said to the Philistines, "You come to me with a sword and a spear, and with a javelin. I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you and take your head from you. And this day I will give the carcasses of the camp of the Philistines to the birds of the air and the wild beasts of the earth, and that all the earth may know there is a God in Israel. Then all this assembly shall know that the Lord does not save with sword and spear. For the battle is the Lord's. He will give you into our hands." Is he relying on his sling? Do you ever stop to think the sling doesn't even kill Goliath? He hits Goliath in the head and Goliath falls down. And then he grabs Goliath's sword and cuts his head off. This is the same David who would write sometime later, "Some trust in chariots and some in horses, but we trust in the name of the Lord our God." I think this story is mislabeled. Do you realize that not once in this entire account does David ever use Goliath's name? Others do. But David always refers to him as that uncircumcised Philistine. What is he saying? He's saying he's not a man of God. This actually, I think, should be the story of David and Saul, because that's the contrast that's being made in this story. The approach of Saul versus the approach of David. And in fact, that was the problem with Saul from the start. You see, Saul would go to God and he would say, "God, what do you want me to do?" And God would say, "Well, I want you to do this." He'd go, "Great, see you later. I'm going to go out and do it. And he would come back and say, okay, I did it. God would say, you didn't do what I asked. And he'd say, what do you mean? That's what you told me to do. I went out and did it. David's approach is different. David's approach, and I have to learn this. God, what are you going to do today? Can I tag along with you? David was along for the ride. The contrast between these two men is stark, but it's the lesson that I think we need to learn. When I was in seminary, and I'm sure I've shared this story here many years ago, my wife's car broke down. Now, that was the only car we had, and it was a fairly new car at the time. This is in the days when they were first introducing electronic controls to automobiles. It did not have fuel injection. It had a computer-controlled carburetor, and the carburetor broke down. And so, some of you know, I worked on cars, so boom, I go out there and I figured out how to read the codes off of the computer. In those days, it wasn't hard because you literally just could put a voltmeter on there and it would literally like send out like Morse code, and you just write down the numbers that would send out. And then you'd look it up and say, oh, that's what's wrong. So it said that the carburetor was bad. So I called up Ford and I said, how much does a carburetor cost? And they said $995. Now that was, like 1980, early 1980s. I'm like, that could have been $1 million. I mean, I didn't have that kind of money. So I called around and I found one for $495. Well, it might as well have been $995 because I didn't have that money either. I remember my dear sweet wife, she said to me, we need to pray. And I said, you don't understand. I know how to fix the car. I just need to get the part. Well, do you have the part? No, I don't have the part. Well, we need to pray. No, you don't understand. I know how to fix the car. And then I started thinking, I'm the pastor here. Why am I not praying? So we knelt down and we prayed. And I went down and I literally just put the key in the ignition and started up the car, and it started up perfectly. So I did the test. It said the carburetor was bad, but the car is running fine. We drove that car for well over 100,000 miles. It ran perfectly. It got great gas mileage, and it passed smog every time. But if you put the computer on it, it would say the carburetor was bad. It taught me a lesson, an important lesson. And God has reinforced that lesson over and over again. I'll tell you another story about that. When I spent 2 years working at the state capitol. I was, my office was literally right across the street from the Capitol building. I was doing legislative analyst work for the church, and that office would deal with like people that had Sabbath work problems, or we dealt with people that had religious garb issues with employers, because we were talking about the principle of religious freedom, the freedom to practice what you believe to be right, as long as it didn't interfere with somebody else's. So doing that kind of work, I remember when I felt called to do that job, I was like, God, I don't know anything about this. And I don't. Still to this day, I did it, and I still don't know anything about it. But I'll tell you what I did learn. Because one day I was using the tools that we had available to us, which was a computer thing that you actually would put in certain search criteria, and then they would actually basically monitor all the bills and stuff, looking for what you were concerned about. And one day this bill pops up, and I read it, and I panicked because I'm thinking, like, how did we miss this earlier? This bill was all the way through. If you don't know how bills are passed into law, it's a messy process. And this was toward the end. It was almost ready to be voted on, and we hadn't seen it coming. And if you understand, this was a time period when the same-sex marriage issue was voted but hadn't been applied because it was still in the courts. And this was a bill that was designed to bypass that process. And the only problem we had with it was, what if a pastor or a church did not feel like they could do a same-sex marriage? This law did not give them an out. They would have to do it. And we said, that's not right. Okay, so But I'm sitting there, I'm thinking like, this is about ready to be voted on, and we haven't weighed in on it, and I don't know that much about it. I'm reading it, and I'm trying, and then I prayed. And God put in my mind a person that I had met. And I called him on the phone. I said, listen, we met once. Oh, yeah, I remember meeting you. I said, this is my challenge. And he goes, well, he says, I'm not working on it. But he worked for the bill. Just so you know, the bill was in the Assembly Judiciary Committee. This guy was a lawyer for the Assembly Judiciary Committee. So I called him. He said, I'm not working on that, but I know who is. She will call you in 15 minutes. She will give you 5 minutes of time. Okay? So sure enough, the phone rings 15 minutes. She doesn't even give me 5 minutes. What she said was, meet me outside of room number something at the Capitol building. And she said, in 10 minutes. So I literally hung up the phone, ran across the street, went through security, got there, stood outside this door number. The door opens, this lady steps out. She goes, okay, what have you got? So I shared with her my concerns. She starts talking. I stopped her. I said, listen, I don't understand a word you just said. I'm not a lawyer. I'm a pastor. So, let me explain our concern, and then you can translate it into whatever language you need to. So, sure enough, she gave me 5 minutes. At the end of 5 minutes, she said, thank you. She disappeared behind the door. And I had peace that I had done what I was supposed to do. So, a few days later, the Assembly Judiciary issue this thing. It's about 6 pages. And the first page is basically just the bill, describing what it is. And then, like, the second page goes through and it talks about what changes with this bill. And then you start getting into sort of the implications and what the effects will be. And then at the very end, they usually put a list of who's in favor and a list of who is opposed. And this document comes out a few days later, and it's following the same format. And then it gets to the end, and it says, but the Church State Council has these concerns, and a whole page of describing what our concerns were. And they modified the bill. Now, that's impossible. People will tell you can't do it at that late a stage because you've cut so many deals along the way to get your bill that far. You have to go back and check with everybody that you've talked to before to make sure it's okay with them. So nobody ever does it. They changed the bill. They changed the bill, all because I prayed and then followed what God led me to do. And that was somebody who doesn't know what they're doing. I just have to end that story, though, by telling you, Arnold Schwarzenegger was governor at the time, and I'll never forget when that bill hit his desk. He wrote a politician's letter. Paragraph 1, this is wonderful, it's neat, and so forth. Paragraph 2, this is going to do so much good. Paragraph 3, I'm vetoing it. Anyway, I want to go back to contrasting those two men, David and Saul. David kept his eyes on God and what God wanted. Saul kept looking at what was going on around him. And I have to say, if you analyze what Saul had to say, he was right. He was not wrong. His analysis was spot on. David should not fight Goliath. It was ridiculous. I'm shocked he even let it happen. But a young man with God defeated a giant. I don't know who the Goliaths are in your life. Goliaths have lots of names. It can be cancer, lost job, divorce. I mean, you can put all kinds of names. But what I want to say is, from God's perspective, all of those are uncircumcised Philistines. They don't really count. What is the mission that God has called for you to perform? It's simple. Just ask him and do what he says. May 31, 2009, an airliner Air France Flight 147 and Airbus 330 left Rio de Janeiro, Brazil on its way to Paris, France. In the early morning hours of June 1, it encountered a storm. And because the Airbus was well equipped, they did not decide to divert around it, but rather they flew through it. Surprisingly, the airplane disappeared. It took 2 years for them to find the black boxes, which they did. And a few years ago now, they finally released the report of what happened. Well, the flight recorders tell a story. They came to the conclusion that as it was going through the storm, and by the way, the two pilots were at the controls were both co-pilots with very few flying hours on that airplane. They're flying. The main pilot is on a break. They enter the storm, and all of a sudden, at one time, all the instruments that read the airspeed, the pitot tubes, all froze up at the same time. All three of them froze at the same moment in time. The computer that operates the plane literally just shut off the control, the autopilot. Just shut it off, because it's like it doesn't understand what's going on, because now it's going 0 miles an hour. So what do we do? It shuts off the autopilot. The two pilots, not understanding what's going on, the instruments are reading funny, they pull back and they end up putting the airplane in a stall. As the airplane pitches over to go back down to the ocean, the computer is going like, we don't understand all these signals we're getting, so it decides to reboot itself. So now they're aiming straight at the ocean, and the computer's going through a reboot process. So they have 0 instruments. Their cockpit is black, nothing. 3 seconds before impact, co-pilot David Roberts says, "Oh my God, we're going to crash." I can't believe it. But the last words on the flight recorder are the other co-pilot, Cedric Bonin, who says, "But what's happening?" An airplane crashed and 229 people died, and nobody on that airplane had any idea what was happening. I wonder, are our instruments working? Do we know what's happening? Because I'll tell you, as I look at our crazy world, I don't know what the answers are. I mean, I see problems. I see people trying to fix them, but sometimes I question whether they're even sincere, some of them, in trying what they are trying. I know when I worked at the Capitol, one of the things that I observed is a lot of people were saying they were working to solve a problem they never intended to solve because their job depended on that problem existing. So I wonder, I would like to end by proposing that the only answer is David's answer. You can look around like Saul did, and you can figure out, and you can think that you have it all figured out. But the reality is, David's the only one that said, "God, only you know. I'm just going to do what you tell me to do." And that's what I'm inviting all of us to do, is just depend on God. And that's why our scripture, trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not on your own understanding, in all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your paths straight. Lord God, please be with us, please guide us and lead us every moment of every day. For we pray it in Jesus' name, amen.
We stand. It seems fitting, this song, which we just kind of picked 2 days ago, 'Tis so sweet to trust in Jesus, and how well, when you pick songs, from my experience, seem to fit what is being said that day. So it is so sweet to trust in Jesus. It's the only way to go. Let's sing. Tis so sweet to trust in Jesus, just to take him at his word, just to rest upon his promise, just to know that said the Lord. Jesus, Jesus, how I trust him, how I proved him o'er and o'er. Jesus, Jesus, precious Jesus, oh, for grace to trust him more. Oh, how sweet to trust in Jesus, just to trust in cleansing blood, just in simple faith to plunge me beneath the healing, cleansing flood. Jesus, Jesus, how I trust him, how I prove him o'er and o'er. Jesus, Jesus, precious Jesus, oh, for grace to trust him more. I'm so glad I learned to trust him, precious Jesus, Savior, friend. And I know that thou art with me, wilt be with me till the end. Jesus, Jesus, how I trust him, how I prove him o'er and o'er. Jesus, Jesus, precious Jesus, oh, for grace to trust him more.
So tithes and offerings are coming up now, and as you can see there, it says it's for the ministry and maintenance budget, and also Christian Record Services is the special, if you would like to give to Christian Record Services. Now, the name really kind of doesn't do it justice for what it actually is. So Christian Record Services deals with people who either have no sight or very little sight, so it's directly related to Braille and the use of Bibles that people who can't see can use. So if you would like to designate your offering, you can, parts of it, you could put their Christian Record Services, and this is the week that they are taking that up around the nation, at least. And speaking of schools, our gentlemen who are taking up the offering today are at the highest level of schools now. So you might recognize Prince and Brent when you see them heading up there. So we are now going to take up the offering for today. Ah, the closing, yes. So that is my name up there. I was waiting to make a QR code joke for myself. But the closing. So, of course, we want to make sure you all remember that we have fellowship dinner potluck happening in the Bed and Living Center directly following the service. So make sure you can, if at all possible, that you can stay. And even if you were watching at home and you want to hustle over here, you could come too as well. I am the elder on call this week, and this is one of the funny things that I chuckle about all the time, because if you were having an issue, really the best way to get in touch with me is call the church and ask, is there a way to get in touch with this guy? Because I'm pretty hard to get in touch with during the week, because I'll be in Walnut Creek. Now, if you happen to be in Walnut Creek and you really need to get in touch with someone, just step on by, come on to Northgate High School, and you could actually see me. But if there is an issue at some point this week, you can call the church office and they can get in touch with me if you would like a call back or you have something going on. And luckily, we do have people that are in the office every day. And even if I wasn't around, they could get in touch with somebody who might be in the Tracy vicinity that could get to you quicker than I might be able to. Once again, we want to say thank you so much to all of you here today. Welcome back, Pastor Ed and Mrs. Fargusson. And we will hopefully see you here next week.